Welcome everyone to another Core Devs talk. I believe this is our 8th call already. We're happy to have you, obviously. If you're new here, this is a place where we talk about and discuss the latest updates within the products and protocol, as well as upcoming changes. Here you will hear directly from core devs how ongoing work is moving forward, the current major engineering struggles, major breakthroughs, and while also understanding the current focus areas, what they really are at the moment. So we try to keep this conversational while proposing topics to be addressed by these core devs to sparkle some discussion. We have some ideas for today. I think it's going to be quite interesting. We expect you to engage in these conversations as well, so feel free to use the chat to ask questions. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat. And yeah, these calls are always recorded as well, so you can later check them out on YouTube. We do upload them a couple hours afterwards. So I believe we have a couple updates we might want to talk about. I think it's a cool, interesting topic to raise. We have some GIPs coming. The core devs have been talking about a few things we want to post on the forum for greater visibility and to have your guys' feedback on it as well. I think we should start there. Yeah, so it's going to be a process. That's the overarching goal really is for us to start using the GIP process more often, so you guys are aware of the things we want to work on, get your feedback on it, and also use that to update you on the latest, yeah, how things are moving forward really. So if we have a couple of things we can start with, Yannis, Adam, I don't know, do you guys want to discuss here what we've been talking about, the 3-4 new GIPs?
Sure. Yeah, I don't see Adam right now. He may be on.
I think he's on the call. Yeah, he is.
Hello.
Cool. So yeah, so we're preparing a bunch of GIPs for different things. Some issues with the current network software, and others are new features. And so the one that I've worked on so far, and that's kind of gone through internal review, and the next step is to share it properly, post it on the forum, and then also discuss it among the core devs, is about situations where indexers try to handle a query, try to process a query, but can't return a result or don't have the confidence in returning a result, maybe because they have a corrupt database. And right now, GraphNode basically spills out an error, but it looks like any other query error, like a syntax error in the query or like a schema mismatch. And so right now we can't tell these things apart. And so anytime an indexer fails because of some internal problem with their own infrastructure, the clients, or right now the gateway, treats that as a successful result and returns it back to the consumer. And that is a problem because really what we want to do in situations where we get these like non-deterministic results that vary from indexer to indexer, we want to try other indexes to see if they have the same problem or if they can return a successful response that actually has actual data and that does not have problems due to, for instance, database corruption. So that require a few changes in a few places, GraphNode indexer service, and also the gateway software. GIP for that is yes, almost ready. Just need to put some finishing touches on that, and that will then allow us to handle these things more gracefully. Also, remove the potential slashing risk of an indexer returning a result with some internal error that just doesn't make much sense. They shouldn't be at risk of slashing, and also an extension of that could be, for instance, in the future, if an indexer uses, let's say, an Ethereum node implementation or some other blockchain node that is known to have a certain bug that affects certain subgraphs, then they might want to bail out of serving queries for that subgraph as soon as possible, even before they've stopped allocating towards the subgraph, etc. So there's more discussions to be had about that kind of extension, but it's been brought up and could be interesting. Adam, do you want to briefly cover the things that you are working on, or should I? I think you're better equipped to do it.
Sure. Yeah. So there are three areas of sort of draft GLPs. So if I can share more broadly, upcoming, like two of them are areas that I think we've talked quite a lot about before, and there is some prior art. Actually, in all the areas, but so what's referred to as sort of subgraph composition, which is essentially a pattern for essentially leveraging other subgraphs within your subgraph. So that's like hopefully reducing sort of duplicate work across subgraphs. It's creating functionality where at sort of query time subgraphs can reference entities and entities from other subgraphs, and this there's been quite a long-standing long-standing feature request that unlocks a bunch of potential things, everything from like slightly more parallel execution in a kind of way, but also, yeah, as I say, meaning that popular subgraphs that are like commonly extended can just be directly leveraged rather than having to copy the code into your subgraph to make the best use of them. And so the challenge there is around establishing some good syntax, good patterns within the manifest and within the schema for doing that. The second area is what's I think previously been referred to as sort of data pipelining. So this is the idea that a subgraph might be triggered to run handlers not just on the basis of events on chain, but also on the basis of updates to entities from the same subgraph or other subgraphs, which creates a bit more of a sort of pipelining chain of processing, which maybe makes execution a bit more atomic, makes it a bit easier to sort of reason about what you're doing within a given subgraph, and could also be done sort of across subgraphs in the same way. So again, going from these sort of really isolated atomic subgraphs to something that could be sort of building on different subgraphs. So those are both like quite substantial changes in terms of what might be available to subgraph authors. And then the third thing is actually more a revisiting of the IPFS sort of functionality that currently exists within GraphNode. So at the moment, fetching files from IPFS happens within mappings, and there are all sorts of reasons why that's problematic, both from a sort of performance and sort of reliability and throughput perspective, but also from a determinism perspective. You can't deterministically say whether at the moment whether a given file is available or not. So it makes sort of POI and indexing determinism sort of impossible with the current architecture. So there's a bit of work to separate out fetching those files from IPFS, doing that a bit more asynchronously, and also preparing for essentially integration with a sort of availability chain. So that's something which can help us move IPFS away from being non-deterministic as it currently is to being essentially something that could be deterministically supported on the network. So so a few quite big proposals, and yeah, looking forward to sharing them in the coming days and weeks. And yeah, any questions about those, or if you want to chat offline about those things, very, very happy to do so.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Yanis. Yeah, so again, we'll be posting this on the forum. Looking forward for your comments and feedback while we work through these issues. We'll be making sure we update you on how things are moving, and it's going to be excited for sure. So continue on this trend. I see Alex also joined, Matt from Streaming Fast. Maybe we can update and check the progress on how multi-blockchain really is. We know that back in February, we've announced we'd be adding support for additional blockchains like Near, Polkadot, Solana, Celo, while also exploring others such as Cosmos, Binance Smart Chain, Avalanche, and others, I believe. All these are progressing. I think today we can already check on how things are with Near. I believe Matt can already do a quick demo. Would be great to see how things are.
So
yeah, Alex,
I have
please.
to excuse Matt had an issue with his house. He's building a house. A few weeks back, his roof fell off and water went down in the drain, and he had an issue right now, so he won't be able to join us for the demo right now. It's not the same thing. It's not the whole house, but he had enough issues with his house recently. So I won't be able to run the demo for Near right now. I don't know if he'll be able to join by the end of this call, but maybe I could give some updates on other things.
Sure, nice.
Like, so
Let's
maybe I
do
can
it.
tell you what the demo could have been had he been there. I don't have it set up on my machine here. So we have for Near running a Near instrumented node there using the indexer framework that's piping out data in the fire hose fashion, and then going through triggers, mapping, and hitting mappers, so assembly script functions for the on block method. So that runs sort of end to end, and he could have shown that to you, and stores entities like in the graph node using the fire hose, the new fire hose source that lives in the graph node. So it would have been much crunchier with the demo.
I guess we just have to wait then.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not like everything is ready yet. Obviously, we still
so we need more hand. Like
to
we'll
figure
be
out.
working on, like, maybe the team there deciding on how we split the work there to map more triggers, because right now you have the on block, which is relatively useful, and so once we get that, we'll get more potential use cases covered, so we can discuss that maybe a little later.
The expectations are pretty high now. We'll just have to wait to see it. Amazing. This was also I mean, this is not, Alex, thanks for the update, that this is not just streaming fast work, right? This you guys have been working closely also with Edge and Node. I don't know if you guys want to talk about this integration work, how the process is going.
Right. So we're still figuring out, the piece of work each takes, and sort of, so we done some work on the fire hose side and bringing a few of the, the main entry point of the data. Now there's the trigger work. We want to find out who's going to be the best person to do that. I think it was a little bit in the Edge and Nodes side, but we will be happy to, tackle more things if we can speed things up. Near has not moved that much in the past few days, so maybe there's opportunity for us to take on some load. I know you guys are pretty loaded there, so that's the state. But otherwise, the collaboration, we have a good relation, and that's for the public, right? So we're happy digging into those things together, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun. Also jumping on other chains eventually. We have an update on Solana sometime.
Yeah, maybe we could speak a little bit to our side of the integration. So I know that the Near changes for Graph Node have been merged. Were merged yesterday. I think there's some fixes in a pull request open today. And we're also working on the Graph TS type definitions for Near, so that you have access to certain Near data structures like the block. I think it's called a receipt. Which is kind of the equivalent, I think, to maybe to an Ethereum call payload, something like that. So that would be the next kind of trigger. You can tell that I'm not deep in the integration work myself, but we're working on those type definitions, and also on the conversion of the types that we receive in Graph Node along with the triggers to pass them over to assembly script. There's always like a little bit of transformation that we need to make to map the Rust data structures to assembly script memory representations. And there's also some work to be done in Graph CLI, because right now Graph CLI, when you build a subgraph, you deploy a subgraph, that still assumes certain parts are Ethereum, always Ethereum related, like the data sources when it validates the manifest. Initially, that was just Ethereum contract data sources. Now we're moving on to Near data sources. And so there's some work there to be done on like validating the manifest, skipping ABIs, for instance, which we don't have on Near. So skipping like the code generation that we normally do. There's also initializing a new subgraph for Near, graph init, which currently assumes you're building a subgraph for Ethereum. So there's a few tweaks here and there that we need to make to break out the Ethereum specific code and only use that for Ethereum subgraphs. That's well underway as well.
Yeah, and I think just the So the fire hose, so that initial sort of fire hose provider sort of block stream so I think that was merged in last week, and that was obviously with a view to like near as the first initial use case, but I think we're also verifying the gap between sort of enabling that sort of that for Ethereum subgraphs, so we can then start to look and compare the sort of RPC sort of existing in like integration that exists within GraphNode with the with the firehose, with the blocks that are coming straight from the firehose. So I know that there's a bit of sort of validation and testing going on there this week as well.
Maybe a small
Thanks,
note.
guys.
Maybe a small note on the Ethereum. So there's been work on the near integration for Firehose, but there's been pressure on the Aragon side and the call handler side. So we're putting some work to actually ship the Firehose in a working fashion for Ethereum, so that we could eventually, alleviate the risks of not having an Aragon set up for call handlers. Right, so there's been work being done on that front too. As Open Ethereum gets deprecated, if we don't have another solution, maybe the Firehose could go and fill that gap, and also shrink, simplify the setup. Instead of an archive node for call handlers, the Firehose can satisfy, be a little bit more precise, and so we have an opportunity window, I think, there to make a dent into that realm too.
Yeah, I think there's a broader interesting thing, because the firehose does unlock slightly more precise ordering, which isn't currently possible with the RPC, because you actually get the real sort of order that things happened on chain. But I think as we think, there's a quite careful sort of versioning, migration, compatibility story that we need to get right as we move forward and start adopting the firehose for more sort of the data from the firehose for more things. So we need to do our homework and think out loud there a bit too, I think.
On that topic, I'd love to hear from Alex. Maybe if you could add a little bit of color to what you guys are doing around integration testing to sort of make sure that the near integration is deterministic, and is there anything that you guys have done there that you think could be applied to pulled back into what we're doing with Ethereum and other chains?
Right. So the and also for the Ethereum stack, the same way the data is produced, and we have some sort of testing for running a node and outputting its data and comparing. We have a thing like maybe you have seen called Battlefield. Each time we discover, because we will discover issues, right? A data integrity error or some conditions in which case extraction was not correct. So right now we're in the process of reprocessing the full history for the second time, because we've had a small issue, and we'll want to do that. And that's why we appreciate having that done in parallel, which gives a big crunch on the GCP instances, because they use snapshots from the disk, and then it's a lot of data. But so this allows us to reprocess and refine, and at the same time augment what we call the Battlefield set of contracts. And when we discover an issue, we find out, what is the cause of the issue, and we reproduce it in that small chain. The Battlefield chain for us is a chain from scratch that exercises all the features, all the wonkiness and the state transition that we would find to produce some of the data bits that were wrong or something like that. So that's part of sort of the integration testing to ensure the output of the Firehose is correct, which is sort of separate from the rest, but can be iterated on its own and simplifies. Once the data is in files and we're satisfied, and then all the rest can flow out without much hassle. And these things can be compared per implementation also. We usually do that for Open Ethereum and Geth, in two separate stages. And we're looking into some other things. We'll see if Aragon needs to be instrumented, but there's a few other chains that you guys wanted to support there. We might need to support. But once that Battlefield is applied to one chain and the other, the output should be the same until we find a bug. And then the Ethereum stack is pretty well rounded. We've accumulated. Now near, we'll want to go to the same thing. Is that going to be an iterative process, as we're going to try more contracts and figure out how people use those contracts. Maybe there's some things that we haven't yet figured out. These are complex systems. The data, each bit's changing according to their consensus and being reverted and whatnot. There's a lot of complexities. And so we'll learn that as we go, but we do want to increase the reliability of at least that layer, because I think it can detach it from, a larger scale end-to-end testing of the graph node. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and so what's the ground truth that you're comparing against with your Battlefield smart contracts? Is that the sort of output file state that you expect a priori, or are you comparing it along two different execution paths, like one with the fire hose, one using like the RPC path?
That's a good question. I don't think currently Battlefield tests against the JSON RPC output, but at the same time, I know there's been some questions like the instrumentation done in Firehose is done in some places where there's just little room for error, because when the contract sets a value, it's the code that sets the value in the storage and the memory. The data is output there. There's little chances, there's a little wiggle room for error. We're actually much closer to what's really happening than the RPC endpoint. So we've found some issues by fooling around in the past, even on RPC endpoints, because even the RPC doesn't always have a point of comparison, right? The thing is, they do the work, they say, okay, we think it's good, but then it's only when we work in these things and we try to figure and play around that we discover new issues. So no, the Firehose doesn't have a comparison per se, because it's a new way of doing things. We constantly try to check against other sources and we find bugs here and there. So I would say in terms of data quality, it's an ongoing process, and we're still discovering, like I'm thinking Aragon or other implementations, still discovering issues that no one cross-checked in years, because they have their implementation, but they won't do 5 implementations either, right, to compare. So it's still a tricky situation, but it's better because we have 2 and we can test. But the end-to-end suite that we have there for battle testing, the Battlefield test suite does not compare with JSON RPC, just to be explicit.
I think it is an area.
Go ahead.
That is, I was just going to say, I think that is definitely an area where we want to create a slightly more robust sort of standardized framework that certainly as there are more teams contributing, that anyone can sort of pass things through, and also so the wider ecosystem can have confidence when new releases come out, that essentially there won't be any sort of unexpected things if you're using a client that doesn't happen to be one of the ones we test with. So it's definitely something to think about over the next couple of weeks and months.
Yeah, I think something we'll be probably talking more about on the core dev side is end-to-end, kind of integration testing. So not just the Firehose, part of the data pipeline, but all the way down to the query side of things. Semiotic, who's on the call, they developed this really useful query generation tool, where we think we've already spotted a couple of determinism issues on the query execution side of things. If our learnings from over the summer taught us anything, was that when we kind of, really opened things up on the, POI disputes, we discovered all these sort of POI determinism issues. But it was a lot harder of a debug cycle because we were sort of working with indexers, in public, trying to spot these things. And in an ideal world, we would spot these things ahead of time with the, our integration testing suite. So we're not doing these sort of debug cycles in the forums or, over Discord.
That's a good segue.
I believe Ford is actually working. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, go ahead, Ford.
Yeah, it's a perfect segue. So
read my mind.
One of the projects that I'm working on right now is a fully self-contained integration testing environment that will allow core dev members to run a full graph network on their laptop or whatever machine they have. So right now at Edge and Node, we have some testing infrastructure that we deployed to our cloud infrastructure, but that's really not easily shareable. It's not easily runnable by a single dev on their laptop. So I'm working on building out a system so you can run a whole graph network on your laptop. So what does that mean? That includes like a hard hat developer chain that will have the contracts deployed to it. It'll deploy an IPFS node, a full indexer infrastructure with indexer agent, graph node, and indexer service. a Subgraph Studio API server, a gateway, a fisherman, Subgraph availability oracle, and then it'll set things up by publishing a subgraph to the network, minting signal on that subgraph, staking for the indexer, and then you can have a full graph network testing environment to test queries, and then test the various components for developers that are working on them.
Cool. Thanks. Going to be quite useful once you start integrating all of these networks, and we need to test things end to end for sure. Okay. We mentioned semiotic, and we actually have Sam in the call as well. And yeah, Chris Wexels is saying something. Let me check the chat. Yeah, for sure. I agree. Right, so we have semiotic in the call as well. So last week, not last week, last time we've had this call, we've had some updates on the curator's profit scalping analysis. I think that in the previous weeks they've done more analysis, and I think we have some interesting new insights we could share. And maybe once maybe once we're done with this analysis, maybe we can segue into the network protocol upgrades and have Ariel talk about a little bit about these new protocols as well. So Sam, if you're there, do you want to share the interesting findings we have? I know curation has been a hot topic. I think folks will be interested to know what your major findings are now.
You bet. Yeah, so the last time we met, we had just finished a preliminary analysis, and basically we were using a very, let's say, coarse threshold on what was being considered or flagged as profit scalping. The last time, anybody who signaled within 2 minutes of the Subgraph publication was labeled a profit scalper. And of course, what that misses, or what that catches, is Subgraph publishers themselves. So that was basically, and Subgraph publishers are, of course, curating a lot. And so now what we do is, we still call anybody a profit scalper if they signal within 2 minutes of the launch of the Subgraph, unless they're a Subgraph publisher, and they don't get labeled as a scalper anymore unless they both publish, signal, and burn within 1 week of when they launch their Subgraph. So I have just a few slides basically with plots, summary plots, but I'll be talking about profit quite a bit. And what I define as profit is, and everything is going to be in GRT. So everything's being converted to GRT. So it's being converted from graph curation shares back to GRT. So profit is being defined as the GRT withdrawals plus the position value. You could also call that the unrealized value of a current position, and that just means how many GRT would a curator get if they were to burn all of the shares that they currently have, and then minus the amount of GRT they initially deposited into the subgraph. Okay, so with the new analysis, we see that publishers, so honest publishers, have made a profit, aggregate profit of 800,000 GRT. This is followed by honest curators who have made a profit of 183,000 GRT. And then then we have scalpers who have only made an aggregate profit of about 78,000 GRT. So this is much less than last time, because last time I reported most of the publishers were getting sucked up into the scalpers category. Okay, and finally, we have a handful of scalper publishers that have made 10K GRT. Joseph, last time I presented, Joseph was asking about ROI. And so here I'm capturing draws. Deposits to get these ROIs. And we see that this is, yeah, so here is the histogram curators and the scalper curators. So we could see, you know, it's mostly honest curator activity. And here, this is just I thought this was fun. This is an outlier. One of the honest curators has made a killing, a 22x ROI. If we zoom in here, we see a little bit, some more information. So this is, I'm just zooming in to the 0 to 2x ROI. We see that most of the honest curators have actually they've actually lost money. They have about a 0.75 ROI right now, so they've lost about 25%. That's what this says right here. On the other hand, we see that the scalpers, we see that they in general have done a little bit better. So they're either breaking even. So an ROI of 1 means breaking even. So it's just slightly shifted to the right. What this doesn't capture is the recent curation bootstrapping rewards. What those rewards have done, and these rewards aren't captured, so all this data is from on-chain data related to curation events. It doesn't capture the airdrops of curation rewards. So the bootstrapping curation rewards, and what that will have done, and I'm going to do this later, I'm going to add that information in later, but that's going to shift all of this blue stuff to the right. And so I expect that actually at this point, most of the curators probably have an ROI greater than 1. So most bootstrappers, I'm going to expect are doing, they're positive on their investment. Also, what this doesn't capture, or also what I'd like to note here, is that if you look at this equation, so sorry, I see a note from Joshua. He says, I either missed it or failed to understand what is the metric for determining honest versus scalper. Let's go back to that because maybe some other people missed that too. So a curator is being labeled a profit scalper if they signal within 2 minutes of a subgraph publication.
There's an issue with that definition because the most known bots, they listen for the first curator to signal on a subgraph before they front run then that initial transaction and mint on that subgraph.
Okay.
So that initial curation don't need to happen within 2 minutes of the subgraph publication.
Yeah, that's a good point. In fact,
that is the most common bot right now. They listen for the first curator to signal, and then they just front run that signal. So that can be 30 minutes, that can be a week later, but they just make sure to be the first on the bonding curve. They don't listen to the publication itself. But
that's a good point. And
what would be the objective, like on-chain way of identifying someone that sort of front ran versus was just happened to be curating at the same time? Is that something, Orion, that you think you'd need to like actually watch the mempool for? Or do you think there's a way that we could get that from just on-chain data?
I mean, you could probably look at somebody who made a transaction within the same block at the higher gas cost, or at a much higher gas, because most of the bots, they have a really high gas limit and gas price. So, I mean,
that's a great suggestion.
Yeah. So like Brandon mentioned, would that require monitoring the mempool? Would that be like an analysis we'd have to do moving forward?
That should be visible on chain. Unfortunately, I don't think we make it super easy right now through subgraphs to get the gas cost that was used. Let me think.
We have a way.
We don't give transaction receipts. I think we do give gas price though, because that's part of the transaction.
Yeah,
we can recover that from the transaction hashes, because they are in the graph subgraph.
Yeah. Yeah, I think already in the subgraph, handler API will give you the transaction and the gas prices. I think we just don't give you the actual gas consumed, because that's in the transaction receipt.
Got it. Okay, yeah, so that may be very interesting to go back and capture that activity as well. That would be that would be pretty conclusive, I think, that someone was doing front running explicitly and not just rushing to curate on a new subgraph. So I guess one last note I have on this before I show a quick demo of a tool that's coming out of this of that analysis is that currently, last week last time we met Brandon, he presented on work he's doing for capital gains tax related to graph curation, and right now, or subgraph curation. So right now, basically the way the system is we're talking about this mempool, we're talking about front running, and right now it is possible to basically deterministically make profit by doing front running, basically by using flashbots type solutions. And so once these, it's going to be really important to getting the capital gains tax changes in place is going to be important to discourage this deterministic front running ability. And it'll make it more, once that's in place, it's going to make it basically people who want to kind of exploit or extract in this way are going to have to then hold for a long time, and they're going to have to tie up their capital, and there still will be other methods to there's still other extractive techniques, I think, even after the capital gains tax is put in place, but it ties up capital for a longer period of time, which is going to dissuade these sort of extractive behaviors. And I guess one last note is that right now, most of the scalpers aren't making any money. They're using this as basically an ineffective casino, like Brandon. That was Brandon's analogy last time. And they're basically just a menace, and they're causing it's just noise for people who want to be honest curators. They're not very effective. I guess I should show this last slide. So these are the scalper profits in aggregate, and most of them you see are making nothing. And some of them have hit a few home runs, but in general, it's they're not very effective.
Which isn't to discount the disruption they could have on the user experience of using the protocol.
Absolutely,
even if they're not,
and like
end up being profitable.
absolutely.
Sam?
Yeah, Joseph.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you have the volume of GRT transact by the scalpers? Like how many GRTs actually moves from one subgraph to another by scalpers?
I do have access to that. Yeah. Yeah, maybe Joseph, maybe you and I can, I'll message you and I can look at other metrics. If just to echo what Brandon just said, you know, these scalpers are basically these techniques that they're using. They could be refined, and it could be guaranteed profit right now if their approaches were refined. So that's the key point. That's a key point. These actors need to be removed from the system. Okay, finally, I have a quick demo. So this is a so with this demo, basically, what we needed to do for this analysis was measure the position value or the unrealized value of a position for all curators over time. And I'm going to be showing you some an interactive plot that's being done with Python. But at a high level, what I'm going to show you eventually what we're working on is we're porting it to JavaScript so that this visualization can be included in community tools. For example, tools being built by the Graph Curation Station. So what you see here is the, okay, I'm going to stop. Pedro had a note that we need to spend some time going through the protocol upgrades.
Yeah, my note was actually to Matt, was just joining the call and was asking if it had the time to do the actual near demo.
I see. Okay. Do you want
maybe you should leave the near demo for another call, and we continue on this topic and also tackle the network upgrades and protocol upgrades that it's live already in the forum.
Yeah, go ahead. I would just like to apologize for the delay. Sorry. I'm really sorry.
It's okay, Matt. We will have another opportunity for sure.
Okay. Okay. So here we see on the x-axis we have Ethereum block. On the y-axis we have position value. We're looking at the Omen subgraph, and we're looking at this curator. And this curator is actually also the publisher of the subgraph. And what we see here is that this plus 25,000 means that they signaled 25,000 GRT in their subgraph at this point in time. And these other gray bars, these are the position values of other curators that are minting in this. That are minting shares in this Omen subgraph deployment. And then why is the position value of this publisher going up at this point in time? Well, just after they signaled, this curator signaled. And so if you zoom in, you'd be able to see that, and that pushed up their value a lot. Actually, it was this person and this curator. So it increased the value. Actually, there's another one that you can barely see. If I switch here, this person who's flagged as a scalper, they came in right after the subgraph publisher, and it just happens that the math works out so that their position value overlays perfectly. Note that this scalper still holding even up until this to the date of this analysis. They haven't sold. If they would have sold, then it would have shown here. So for example, this curator, who is actually, yeah, so sorry. So this curator, they minted at 8,000, and then they sold at a loss of they sold later at 8,276. So they made a profit. It's green because they made a profit. If they would have made a loss, then they would have a red plot. So the JavaScript version is going to be interactive. When you hover over and click on the plot, it's going to show some information about the curator. You'll be able to click on it, and you'll see we'll also print out some summary statistics, and it's going to be designed so that it can be integrated with the main curator tools. So if anybody has any suggestions for how to make the plot better, please let me know, and then we can integrate those with what we're building for the community.
Amazing. Thanks, Sam. I think Orion will have a blast playing around with this for sure. And we also have the curation station guys doing some great analysis as well. And they will actually receive a grant from the foundation to work on a GUI. I'm guessing this tool will be super helpful. So thanks a lot. With this in mind, that we have a couple of minutes, I want to ask Oliver, do you want to do a brief update or provide some context on the protocol updates? Great.
Let's give me some, let's start with some things that are further downstream. Publish and mint was a feature that we have implemented last week, fully implemented in the protocol. It's live today, which is the ability to deploy and signal or to publish and signal on a subgraph. Been a long-awaited feature, so that's quite exciting that we have it now. We also have reduced curation tax from 2.5% down to 1%, going through council votes starting shortly. Today we have a council meeting where it's going to be discussed, and shortly after we're going to have a snapshot council vote on that. In the forum, we have the simplified cut mechanisms, where we actually have come across over the last few weeks something that wasn't probably well aware in the community, that the new proposal had a settings mechanism from 0 to 100% cut, which removes an ability that is currently available to indexers to set negative effective cuts. So we did a forum poll on that to get a gauge from how the community thinks of that. And what we have seen as a result coming back is that 2/3 of those that have participated in the polling favor a range of -100 to +100, so that, you know, essentially the ability to set negative cuts stays in place. So that's the opinion essentially of the community. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ariel, who has actually introduced a number of new forum posts, and he's going to talk about 2 of them. And I think we want to start with subgraph change of ownership.
These are 2 changes that are very related to the same thing or same story about making life easier for app developers. You mentioned like reducing the curation tax. It's going to make it easier and reduce the friction for them to upgrading. At the same time, we have this mint and publish like bundled. Most of the time, the app developer is the one like signaling for the first time. So that's another improvement. And I proposed a couple of things in the forum related to ownership of the subgraphs. The important thing is, or one thing that we identified is that and it was discussed in the forums, is that whenever you create publish a new subgraph, you are the complete owner of that, but you can't transfer them effectively. Like there are some cases where like maybe a developer within of the projects wants to create the subgraph because it's easier using their private keys, but they would want to transfer it to a multi-sig, or maybe a community member created a subgraph for a project and they want to transfer, and that's hard with the current implementation. So what I'm proposing here is to manage ownership using an NFT. So whenever someone publishes a new subgraph, you get an NFT. Whoever owns the NFT can manage the main actions of a subgraph, that is upgrades, deprecation, and changing the metadata. So that basically this new implementation that is done in APR that needs audits now, it's like implementing this idea, okay? Having an NFT to represent ownership. Again, an NFT is a good thing because it's transferable, it's a standard, so it's very good for this use case. An additional thing about this implementation is that it's have some improvements in the interfaces. We were using like a combination of 2 keys, graph account and subgraph number, to represent a subgraph. But in this new implementation, we are just using a single ID, like one primary key to represent a subgraph. This makes things much easier for everything, when you are going to interact with the contract, but it also makes it easier to represent the subgraph as an NFT, because NFTs has a token ID, that's a single ID. So it makes everything better. So I invite you to discuss about this proposal. You can see the implementation in the PR. and we are like scheduling an audit with we have an upcoming audit with Zeppelin. So this month in about like 2 weeks, a week and a half. So this is the main idea about transfer ownerships. Then
we'll move on to the next one. Any questions that anyone would like to cover on this specific proposal? All right, let's go on to the next one.
Yeah, the next one is it's also like an improvement that it will make things easier for app developers. The way the curation contract works is like whenever you mint for the first time, signal for the first time, there's some initialization process that is happening. That means like setting up the curve with a reserve ratio. But apart from that, we are deploying an ERC20 token. Each subgraph has an ERC20 token that represents a share of a subgraph. We did it that way because like it's easier to create composability on top of subgraph. In fact, the GNS is composing the curation contract by buying shares represented by tokens from the curation contract. But this is quite costly because we are deploying ERC20 tokens whenever you mint for the first time. That's taking roughly a million gas, and that's very similar to how Uniswap works whenever you create a new pool. But there's an improvement that we did with a PR that basically I'm proposing. That is, instead of deploying an ERC20 token each time, like deploying all the bytecode, we are deploying clones of bytecode that is already deployed in mainnets. So that way, this is a technique called minimal proxies. It's used in many places. In fact, Gnosis Safe, multisigs are sort of minimal proxies of the implementation. So we are using the same thing in the creation contract, and it's going to reduce the gas cost like quite a lot, like 3x, I would say. It's going from some calculations I did from 1.2 million to 400K. It would be great to make it even lower, but I think with this proposal, we are reducing it quite a lot. Again, this is implemented in a PR. It requires audits, but it's there so you can add any comments. Okay. That's yeah.
We have a couple more. Do you want to briefly cover those?
Yeah, there are a couple more. There are two more. These are more of like, I would say, improvements, more like related to bug fixes, but not critical. This one, this is something that happened, it's sort of an edge case. Whenever you delegate a very small amount, let's say one way, you could get 0 shares if the ratio of deposits and the amount to get out from shares is very is very low. So this is fixing that condition. It's going to revert if you are like depositing such a small amount of tokens that you're not going to get any shares of the delegation pool. This is not happening, but it's something that we identified and we are like fixing in this PR. Okay, so it's not very critical. The next one, this other proposal is to add a fix to unstake. This is, I would say, more. This is more important than the last one. This is a condition that we identified by talking with one of the auditors that could happen. And this is like if you unstake fully as an indexer, you want to unstake the full amount. There could be this condition where someone stakes a small amount of tokens to your indexer using stake 2, and we have a validation that the stake should be always be larger than the minimum amount. And by someone from running your unstake transaction, they could make your unstake transaction to revert by staking a small amount of tokens. Okay, so this is sort of front running the unstake, fully, right? So we fixed this in a PR. It's already audited. It's ready to be discussed by the council and the community. So we can, like, the community can do the upgrade and the council vote on that. Okay, so both the two ones I mentioned, the last ones I mentioned, are already audited. Okay, so are ready for upgrade if the council decides to.
Very good. So all of the 4 proposals that Ariel just covered, you find in the forum. They've been posted there with the details. So feel free to engage in the conversation and provide feedback on it.
Amazing. I think we're right on time. Any last questions? Doesn't look like it. Okay. I'll see you guys in the forum on Discord. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Matt, thanks so much for joining. Hope everything's well. You'll have your spotlight as well next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.